The sea stretched endlessly before her, dark and violent under the looming gray sky. Cold winds howled across the deck of the Crimson Blade, tugging at cloaks and rattling steel armor. Princess Seralyne Drakkar stood unshaken, her gaze locked on the distant horizon, where the jagged cliffs of Dravenport awaited. Her golden eyes, once soft, now hardened by exile, burned with the promise of vengeance. 10 years ago, the Black Iron Throne had been drenched in her family's blood. Her father, King Aldred the Just, had been betrayed by his closest ally, Lord Varric of Blackmoor, now known across the realm as Varric the Butcher. Her mother was slain in the royal gardens. Her younger brother drowned in the castle's well. And Seralyne, she had fled through secret tunnels beneath the castle, escorted by the loyal knight Sir Corin and her uncle Malric. Or so she had thought. Years of wandering foreign lands had molded her into something far more dangerous than a lost princess. She had fought in pit arenas in the Isles of Vaegir, sailed with the pirate fleets of Crimson Bay, and studied the arts of war under the desert lords of Karza. Her skin now bore scars that whispered of survival, and her soul carried a fury that refused to die. Landfall in 1 hour, Your Highness, came the gravelly voice of Captain Rorik, a broad-shouldered brute with one eye and a mouth full of broken teeth. His loyalty had been bought with gold and kept with blood. He stood by her side, a relic of piracy and rebellion, the captain of the Crimson Blade, the fastest and deadliest ship in the East. Seralyne nodded but said nothing. Her gauntleted fingers tightened around the hilt of her sword, Stormfang, a blade forged from Valyrian steel, black as night, and sharp enough to split bone with ease. Her return to Dravenport was not a quiet one. She brought fire and steel, an army of exiles, mercenaries, and men and women who had no place in the world except beside her. Behind her, the deck buzzed with tension. Warriors cleaned their blades, tightened leather straps, whispered prayers to forgotten gods. Some wore the furs of northern tribes, others the silks of the south, all bound together by one promise: riches, revenge, and a kingdom that would be born from ashes. The sea sprayed salt on her lips, and Seralyne closed her eyes briefly, remembering the last time she had stood on those cliffs, watching her home burn. She had vowed that day to return, or die trying. She had returned. The wind shifted, bringing with it the faint scent of pine and smoke from the coastline. Dravenport awaited, chained under Varric's brutal rule. The people had suffered long enough. She would be their queen, not from inheritance, but through conquest. Captain Rorik leaned closer, lowering his voice. Our scouts say Varric's banners fly over Elenvar, his grip's still strong. But there are murmurs, Highness, whispers of rebellion. If we strike fast and strike hard, the people might rally. Seralyne's jaw tightened. They will, once they see the dragon's daughter has returned. Rorik grinned, revealing a mouth of jagged teeth. Then let's give them a storm. As the Crimson Blade cut through the waves toward Dravenport, the clouds parted slightly, revealing a sliver of moonlight. It glinted off Seralyne's armor, black and crimson like the house sigil that had been erased from every banner and monument. Soon it would rise again. The exiled flame had returned home, and it was hungry for vengeance. Chapter 2. The Ghost City, the once magnificent gates of Elenvar, stood crooked and rusted, their iron hinges groaning in protest as the Crimson Blade's warriors forced them open. The city that had once thrived beneath the shadow of the Black Iron Throne now resembled a tomb, its streets hollow, its alleys darkened by the weight of despair. Seralyne rode at the head of her column, mounted on a black stallion named Nightbane, whose armored hooves clattered loudly against the broken cobblestones. Her cloak, woven from deep crimson wool, whipped behind her like a banner of war. To her right, Lady Caleth rode with grace, her dark hair braided with silver clasps, her emerald eyes watchful beneath a fur-lined hood. It was said Calith had once been a highborn lady in the western duchies, but when her family was slaughtered by Varric's tax collectors, she took up the sword and never looked back. Now she was Seralyne's fiercest blade and most trusted shadow. Elenvar greeted them with silence. Windows were shuttered, doors chained, and the few souls who dared to wander scurried into the shadows as their army approached. The market square, where once spices from distant lands had filled the air, was now a barren expanse of rot and broken stalls. Calith's voice was quiet but sharp. "This city is dying." Seralyne dismounted near the central fountain, once the pride of Elenvar, now cracked and dry. Her boots echoed through the emptiness as she walked forward, fingertips trailing along stone that had been built by her ancestors. Every step was a reminder of what was stolen. A child, no older than 10, peeked from behind a crumbling doorway, his ribs showing through tattered clothes. His eyes were wide, fearful yet curious. Seralyne knelt, removing her helmet. Her golden hair tumbled down, and the boy's breath caught in his throat. He blinked rapidly, as if trying to decide if she was a ghost. "Who do you serve, little one?" Seralyne asked softly. The boy swallowed. "There is no king, only the butcher and his soldiers." Calith's hand went to her sword in quiet fury. Seralyne smiled gently and reached into her pouch, pulling out a silver coin bearing the sigil of Housedracker, a dragon's wing wrapping around a flame. She pressed it into the boy's hand. "Remember this symbol, and tell your mother that the true bloodline has returned," she whispered. "Tell your neighbors the dragon's flame will light the streets of Elenvar again." The boy's eyes filled with tears. He nodded and vanished into the alleyways. Captain Rorick approached, his boots heavy against the stone. Varric's tax riders fled the moment they heard our ships landed. The garrison commander deserted last night, and the city guard, they've scattered like rats. Seralyne rose, her eyes scanning the skeletal remains of a city that once pulsed with life. "We do not come here merely to conquer," she said, her voice carrying through the ranks. "We come to awaken this land from its nightmare. Feed the hungry, open the granaries, repair the wells. Let them see the face of their true queen." Lady Calith grinned fiercely. "And what of the nobles hiding in their manors? Summon them to the Grand Hall by sundown." Seralyne commanded, "They will kneel, or they will burn." Night fell over Elenvar, but for the first time in years, there was light in the streets. Fires burned in the forges, bakeries reopened, and laughter echoed faintly in the alleyways. Children danced around the fountain, where water once again flowed from broken pipes. As Seralyne stood atop the balcony of the old castle, her banner, black and crimson with a dragon's flame, rose over the highest tower. Below, the people gathered, drawn by the sight they thought they'd never see again. Calith stood beside her, smiling. "They will follow you." Seralyne's eyes burned like molten gold. "And together we will shatter Varric's chains." Far beyond the walls of Elenvar, in the cold iron halls of Blackmoor Keep, Varric the Butcher sat on the black iron throne, and felt the first tremors of fear. Chapter 3. The Renegade Pact. The ancient woods of Hadron groaned with age, their massive oaks twisting skyward like grasping fingers. Light barely touched the forest floor, where moss and brambles strangled forgotten ruins. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and something older, something wild. Seralyne rode beneath these gnarled giants in silence, her armored fingers resting on the pommel of her sword. Behind her marched a small host of loyalists, cloaked in dark colors, their banners hidden. They had left Elenvar behind, not to fortify their gain, but to gamble it all on a dangerous alliance. The renegades awaited. Lady Calith rode close, uneasy. "These are not lords or knights," she murmured. "They are wolves. Wolves that have no master. That's why I came," Seralyne replied, because wolves will tear out the throat of the lion. They arrived at a circle of ancient stones, a glade forgotten by maps and untouched by civilization. Smoke curled from several crude fires. Around them lounged the most feared cutthroats of the realm. On one log, Captain Drakan of the Iron Reavers polished a massive axe, his bald head covered in brutal scars. His clan had terrorized the northern shores for 2 decades. Beside him, the infamous pirate queen Esmira sipped dark wine from a jeweled cup, her long braids beaded with the teeth of those who defied her. Her ships were the fastest on the eastern seas, her reputation soaked in both blood and legend. Further back, cloaked in shimmering desert silks, stood the assassins of the Karzar Blades, silent and masked, their curved daggers already whispering promises of death. And at the center, watching like a predator, sat Veron Bloodfang, the self-proclaimed Lord of the Broken Marches. His black armor was mismatched from fallen knights, his crimson cloak stolen from a murdered duke. Veron's grin was full of menace as he rose. "So," he drawled, "the exiled princess dares walk among outlaws." Seralyne dismounted with slow, measured grace. Every eye turned toward her, some curious, others hungry for weakness. But Seralyne showed none. She strode forward, unflinching beneath the gazes of killers and warlords. "I am no longer a princess," she said calmly. "I am the flame that will consume the Butcher King." Draken barked a laugh. "Pretty words, little dragon. We've heard such promises before." Esmira twirled a dagger between her fingers. "Varric pays his mercenaries in gold and land. What do you offer?" Seralyne's voice rang clear and sharp. "Freedom." A ripple of uneasy muttering passed through the gathered renegades. "I offer no chains, no crowns upon your heads forcing you to kneel," she continued. "Fight beside me, and you will not be my subjects. You will be the masters of your own dominions. The north will belong to the Reavers, the seas to the Crimson Fleet, the desert roads to the Karzar Blades. You will have power beyond what Varric dares grant you." Veron tilted his head. "And what of you, Flame Queen? What's left for you when all the wolves have feasted?" Seralyne smiled, slow and fierce. "I will take my throne, and I will make it a throne not of chains, but of iron-bound by choice. My realm will be reborn from blood and rebellion." The renegades stirred. Some laughed, others listened, and many exchanged wary glances. Seralyne walked to the ancient stone altar at the center of the circle. She drew Stormfang, its black steel catching the flicker of the firelight. "I will bleed first," she said, slicing her palm and letting crimson drip onto the altar. "A vow in blood, unbroken and unbending. Betray me, and may the gods curse me. Follow me, and we will set this world ablaze." One by one, the warlords approached. Captain Drakan, after a growl of satisfaction, cut his palm and slammed his bloody fist onto the altar. For fire and plunder, Esmira followed with a devilish grin, her blood staining the stone. For vengeance and the spoils of war, even the silent Karzar assassins pressed their daggers to their hands, dripping blood in quiet affirmation. Finally, Veron Bloodfang approached. His eyes were sharp and knowing, but after a long pause, his blade kissed his palm. "For chaos and for war," he said, "I follow the flame." As the pact sealed in blood was made, Seralyne stood tall, surrounded by wolves, pirates, and killers, all bound not by loyalty, but by a shared hunger to see Varric's empire collapse. The Renegade Pact was born, and with it, the first true tremor of revolution shook the kingdom. Chapter 3. The Renegade Pact. The ancient woods of Hadron groaned with age, their massive oaks twisting skyward like grasping fingers. Light barely touched the forest floor, where moss and brambles strangled forgotten ruins. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and something older, something wild. Seralyne rode beneath these gnarled giants in silence, her armored fingers resting on the pommel of her sword. Behind her marched a small host of loyalists, cloaked in dark colors, their banners hidden. They had left Elenvar behind, not to fortify their gain, but to gamble it all on a dangerous alliance. The renegades awaited. Lady Calith rode close, uneasy. "These are not lords or knights," she murmured. "They are wolves. Wolves that have no master. That's why I came," Seralyne replied. "Because wolves will tear out the throat of the lion." They arrived at a circle of ancient stones, a glade forgotten by maps and untouched by civilization. Smoke curled from several crude fires. Around them lounged the most feared cutthroats of the realm. On one log, Captain Drakan of the Iron Reavers polished a massive axe, his bald head covered in brutal scars. His clan had terrorized the northern shores for 2 decades. Beside him, the infamous pirate Queen Esmira sipped dark wine from a jeweled cup. Her long braids beaded with the teeth of those who defied her. Her ships were the fastest on the eastern seas, her reputation soaked in both blood and legend. Further back, cloaked in shimmering desert silks, stood the assassins of the Karzar Blades, silent and masked, their curved daggers already whispering promises of death. And at the center, watching like a predator, sat Veron Bloodfang, the self-proclaimed Lord of the Broken Marches. His black armor was mismatched from fallen knights, his crimson cloak stolen from a murdered duke. Veron's grin was full of menace as he rose. "So," he drawled, "the exiled princess dares walk among outlaws." Seralyne dismounted with slow, measured grace. Every eye turned toward her, some curious, others hungry for weakness. But Seralyne showed none. She strode forward, unflinching beneath the gazes of killers and warlords. "I am no longer a princess," she said calmly. "I am the flame that will consume the Butcher King." Drakan barked a laugh. "Pretty words, little dragon. We've heard such promises before." Esmira twirled a dagger between her fingers. "Varric pays his mercenaries in gold and land. What do you offer?" Seralyne's voice rang clear and sharp. "Freedom." A ripple of uneasy muttering passed through the gathered renegades. "I offer no chains, no crowns upon your heads forcing you to kneel," she continued. "Fight beside me and you will not be my subjects. You will be the masters of your own dominions. The north will belong to the Reavers, the seas to the Crimson Fleet, the desert roads to the Karzar Blades. You will have power beyond what Varric dares grant you." Veron tilted his head. "And what of you, Flame Queen? What's left for you when all the wolves have feasted?" Seralyne smiled, slow and fierce. "I will take my throne, and I will make it a throne not of chains, but of iron bound by choice. My realm will be reborn from blood and rebellion." The renegades stirred. Some laughed, others listened, and many exchanged wary glances. Seralyne walked to the ancient stone altar at the center of the circle. She drew Stormfang, its black steel catching the flicker of the firelight. "I will bleed first," she said, slicing her palm and letting crimson drip onto the altar. "A vow in blood, unbroken and unbending. Betray me, and may the gods curse me. Follow me, and we will set this world ablaze." One by one, the warlords approached. Captain Drakan, after a growl of satisfaction, cut his palm and slammed his bloody fist onto the altar. For fire and plunder, Esmira followed with a devilish grin, her blood staining the stone. For vengeance and the spoils of war, even the silent Karzar assassins pressed their daggers to their hands, dripping blood in quiet affirmation. Finally, Veron Bloodfang approached. His eyes were sharp and knowing, but after a long pause, his blade kissed his palm. "For chaos and for war," he said, "I follow the flame." As the pact sealed in blood was made, Seralyne stood tall, surrounded by wolves, pirates, and killers, all bound not by loyalty, but by a shared hunger to see Varric's empire collapse. The Renegade Pact was born, and with it, the first true tremor of revolution shook the kingdom. Chapter 4. The Siege of Ashenspire. The mountains loomed like ancient gods. their jagged peaks cloaked in mist and snow. Nestled against the steep cliffs stood Ashenspire Keep, an obsidian fortress forged from black stone, crowned with spiked battlements and iron towers. No army had ever breached its gates. No rebel had ever returned alive from its dungeons. Seralyne intended to be the first. Her army, a sea of outcasts and hardened warriors, stretched across the valley. Ragged banners flapped in the cold wind, black, crimson, and silver, symbols of renegades who had cast aside the rule of kings. Pirates stood shoulder to shoulder with northern raiders. Desert assassins crouched among mercenary phalanxes. War horns rumbled like distant thunder. On the eve of battle, Seralyne stood before them, her armor freshly polished, her cloak billowing in the mountain wind. She raised Stormfang high, its black steel gleaming like a shard of night. Her voice soared through the valley. This is a reckoning for every child starved under Varric's tax collectors, for every family burned by his Black Legion, for every noble who watched and did nothing while the kingdom rotted. Cries of fury erupted through the ranks. Seralyne's voice dropped into a sharp growl. Tonight, Ashenspire falls. Behind her, Captain Raric grinned viciously. I've dreamt of storming this cursed keep for years. Lady Kaelith's expression was colder, more calculating. It is a fortress carved from the mountain itself. We'll bleed to take it. Seralyne's jaw clenched. Then we bleed. When the moon rose, the first assault began. Battering rams thundered against the main gates, their iron-bound heads smashing into ancient wood. Siege towers, stolen from Varric's own outposts, rolled forward with terrifying groans, unleashing hordes of screaming warriors onto the walls. Flaming arrows filled the sky like a storm of embers. From the ramparts, Varric's defenders fought back with brutal precision. Pitch and oil rained down, igniting flesh and bone. Boulders hurled by catapults crushed entire battalions. Crossbow bolts whistled through the air, finding gaps in armor, felling men and women alike. Seralyne rode among her soldiers, rallying the broken, reinforcing the faltering. Her blade cut through the night, severing limbs and splitting helms. Every step forward was paid in blood. Every gain met with brutal resistance. By midnight, the first breach was made. A section of the east wall, weakened by ancient neglect, crumbled beneath relentless bombardment. Pirates, led by Esmira, surged through the gap, cutting down surprised defenders. In the narrow corridors of Ashenspire, the battle became a slaughterhouse. Blade against blade, shield against axe, the screams of the dying echoing through the stone halls. The enemy commander, Sir Valden, fought like a demon, cutting down entire ranks, his black armor dripping with gore. Lady Kaelith found Seralyne amidst the chaos, her breathing ragged. We must fall back. Ashenspire devours men faster than we can send them. Seralyne's response was steel cold. No, we take the throne hall before dawn, through the maze of iron staircases and brutalist halls. Seralyne carved her path. Her warband followed, relentless, refusing to yield. She remembered every hallway. This was her home, desecrated and defiled. Finally, they reached the Great Hall, the Chamber of Kings, where Varric's traitorous reign had begun. The iron doors shuddered under the ram, splintering, cracking. With a final deafening crash, they burst open. Varric's last line of defenders stood ready, grim-faced, battle-weary, but Seralyne was a storm-given flesh. She led the charge herself, cutting through the guard captain in a single blow. The renegade host flooded the throne room, overwhelming the enemy in a tide of fury and vengeance. And there, at the end of the long crimson carpet, the black iron throne awaited. Cold, spiked, monstrous. But Varric was nowhere to be found. Seralyne's fury was ice in her veins. "Where is he?" she roared. Kaelith approached the throne, her sword stained black. Gone, fled through the mountain tunnels like the coward he is. Seralyne stood before the cursed throne, her breathing heavy, her body aching with wounds both fresh and old. She touched the dark iron that had once been her father's seat of power. Ashenspire had fallen, but the war was far from over. Outside, the banners of House Draker rose once more, black and crimson flapping over the cursed fortress. Seralyne whispered, "Varric will pay, and I will hunt him to the ends of the earth." Chapter 5. Betrayal in the shadows. Ashenspire was theirs, but its halls still whispered of treachery. The fires of battle had died down, yet the scent of blood clung to every stone. Seralyne stood atop the battlements as dawn painted the mountains in muted gray. The army cheered her name from the courtyards below, their cries echoing through the valley. Victory should have tasted sweet, yet her heart felt hollow, gnawed by unease. Lady Calith approached, her armor dented, a thin cut across her cheek. "The prisoners are secured, the dead counted, but there's no sign of Varric. The scouts say the mountain tunnels are ancient and vast. He could be anywhere." Seralyne's jaw tightened. "No, he's nearby, like a rat hiding in the walls." That morning, as her soldiers feasted on victory, Seralyne convened her council in the war chamber, once a sanctum of kings. The old maps of the kingdom were spread across a massive oak table, scarred by generations of rulers. The warlords gathered around, each radiating dangerous energy. Captain Rorick leaned forward. "We bleed too much chasing Varric. Let him run. His power's broken. We should march on Blackmoor while his forces scatter." Esmira tapped a jeweled dagger on the table. "A cornered animal is most dangerous. If Varric slips away, he'll rebuild, and we'll have to fight this war twice." Seralyne listened, weighing every word. But it was Lady Calith's quiet voice that cut through the noise. "There's someone you must see," Calith said grimly. In the dungeons of Ashenspire, they dragged forth a prisoner who had hidden himself among the defeated officers. A thin, gray-haired man in faded noble garb. Seralyne's breath caught in her throat when she recognized the sharp cheekbones and narrow, calculating eyes. "Uncle Malric," she said, her voice a dangerous whisper. The chamber fell silent. He was the man who had once carried her through the secret tunnels, saving her from the massacre at the castle. The man who had whispered promises of loyalty as they fled through the night. She had believed he was dead, murdered by Varric's hunters. Now, he stood before her in shackles, his once proud features reduced to weariness, but his eyes still gleamed with poison. "You should have stayed dead," Seralyne said coldly. Malric shrugged. "Survival is a strange thing, my dear niece. I did what I must." Calith stepped forward, her hand on her blade. He was captured trying to escape through the lower catacombs. He wore Varric's crest beneath his robes. Seralyne's heart twisted in her chest. Betrayal burned like acid in her veins. You were part of this. Part of the slaughter." Malric raised his chin, defiant even in chains. "I was the architect, Seralyne. The great chessboard of power demands sacrifice. Your father was weak. His mercy drowned this kingdom. Varric promised a future of order, and I helped build it." Seralyne's knuckles whitened around Stormfang's hilt. "You think you rule now," Malric sneered. "But Varric is not like the rest of these pitiful lords. He has allies in distant lands. Gold hoarded in vaults you cannot imagine. Even now, as you stand in triumph, his riders flee to summon aid. Your flame is bright, but it will burn out." The chamber seethed with quiet fury. Calith's voice was cold steel. "Say the word, and I will remove his head." Seralyne's breath shook. Memories of Malric's hand guiding her through the darkness warred with the truth now laid bare. "No," Seralyne said, stepping forward. "I want him alive." Gasps rippled through the room. "He will be paraded through every village that remembers my father's justice. Every town where Varric's banners hang in oppression will see his traitorous face," she declared. "And when the time comes, I will spill his blood before the Black Iron Throne, as a promise that no traitor will ever again rise in this land. Marek's jaw clenched, but Seralyne could see fear beginning to crack his mask. That night, Seralyne stood alone in the ancient throne hall. The Black Iron Throne loomed before her, silent and cold. Her reflection stared back from the polished spikes of steel. She felt the weight of destiny pressing down, and within it, the bitterness of betrayal. Caliph joined her quietly, voice softer now. Seralyne closed her eyes. Then I will become something they will never forget. Her war was far from over. Varric still breathed, and the realm was still broken. But the shadows that had stolen her past would never steal her future. Chapter 6. The fire-reborn dawn crept over the mountains, turning the cold sky into streaks of gold and crimson. The Black Iron Throne stood silent at the end of the Great Hall, its jagged edges gleaming like the teeth of some ancient beast. A seat carved by ambition, bathed in betrayal, and now reclaimed through blood. Seralyne stood before it, her gauntlets smeared with the remnants of war, her golden eyes fierce beneath the weight of destiny. The air was thick, with the scent of smoke and iron. Every muscle in her body ached from the brutal conquest, every scar a reminder of the price paid to stand here once more. Outside, the banners of House Drakkar flew high, black silk kissed by crimson flame, over the ramparts of Ashenspire. Her army stood assembled in the courtyard. Pirates, warriors, deserters, and dreamers. The renegades who had followed her through hell now raised their weapons in triumph. Lady Caliph entered the throne hall quietly, her blade sheathed at her side, green eyes watching Seralyne with quiet pride. The people are gathering in the lower courtyards. They've come from every village surrounding Ashenspire. Word spreads like wildfire. The exiled princess has returned, and the Butcher King has fled. Seralyne didn't turn. She stared at the throne, memories flashing in her mind. Her father's calm voice echoing in these halls, her mother's laughter on summer mornings, her younger brother's clumsy swordplay. Ghosts. All of them. Caliph's voice softened. They await your words. With a long breath, Seralyne turned away from the throne. Then let them hear the roar of the flame. Moments later, she stood atop the battlements, looking down upon a sea of faces. Thousands had come. Peasants in tattered clothes, freed slaves, broken knights who had thrown down their shields, children who had only known the rule of a tyrant. Among them stood her ragged army, warriors bruised and bloodied, but victorious. Caliph, Rorik, Ismira, Veyron Bloodfang, all stood behind her, their blades lowered in respect. Seralyne raised Stormfang high, the black blade catching the morning sun. The Black Iron Throne has been broken. Her voice thundered. The age of Varric's terror is ending. The chains he forged have been shattered by your hands, by the courage of those deemed outlaws, by the fury of those who refused to kneel. A roar answered her, rising like a tidal wave through the valley. For too long, this land has been ruled by fear. For too long, our people have been slaughtered for gold, silenced for speaking truth, and broken for daring to dream. Today, that ends. Her eyes swept over the crowd. Today we rise from the ashes. We rise not as lords and slaves, but as free men and women. We rise with the fury of the forgotten, with the strength of the exiled, with the fire of the betrayed. Today, we reclaim not only the throne, but our future. The cheers shook the very foundations of Ashenspire. Seralyne lowered Stormfang, stepping down from the wall. Her commanders followed her into the throne hall, where the Black Iron Throne waited. With a single motion, she unsheathed her blade and brought it down in a flash of steel. The throne shrieked as the blade sliced through its iron limbs. Piece by piece, she shattered it, until nothing remained but broken, twisted steel. Her warriors watched in stunned silence. Caleth's voice broke the hush. "You destroyed the throne." Seralyne stood amid the wreckage, breathing steady. "The throne was built on suffering. I will not rule a kingdom chained by the mistakes of the past." She turned to the gathered warlords and nobles, her command absolute. "From this day forward, there will be no black iron throne. We will build a new seat of power, not of cruelty, but of justice. Not for tyrants, but for the people." Her words rolled like thunder through the ancient halls. "Those who fought beside me will have their lands, their freedoms. Those who seek peace will find protection. But those who threaten the freedom of this realm will know only steel and flame." Rorik pounded his chest. "To the Flame Queen." The chant spread like wildfire, echoed by Caleth, Ismira, the renegades, the people outside. "To the Flame Queen! To the Flame Queen!" Seralyne stood tall, her shoulders back, her gaze unbroken. She had returned not to reclaim a cursed throne, but to forge a kingdom from the embers of a broken world. She had returned not to rule by bloodline, but by strength and justice. In the land once crushed beneath the shadow of iron, a new dawn blazed. The exiled princess had become a queen of fire, of rebellion, of hope. And this was only the beginning. Months passed since the fall of Ashenspire, and the winds of change howled through the fractured kingdom. From the freezing peaks of the northern range to the golden sands of the south, the banners of the Flame Queen fluttered proudly. Seralyne's reign was born not in silk-draped coronations, but in fires that consumed corruption and sword edges that severed the necks of oppressors. Roads that once dripped with fear now sang with caravans of trade. Fields abandoned under the weight of taxes sprouted green once more, and yet one shadow still lingered. Varric the Butcher lived. Every report that reached the Flame Court whispered his name. Like a disease, his agents crept across borders, poisoning wells of peace, gathering forgotten loyalists who dreamt of the return of the old tyranny. Seralyne stood atop the newly built Tower of Dawn in Elenvar, her capital now reborn. Below her, the city teemed with life, its scars healing, its people rebuilding. Lady Caleth approached, her armor freshly polished. "Another report from the Western Highlands. Varric has gathered remnants of his Black Legion. They raid villages along the borderlands." Seralyne's jaw tightened, like a wounded wolf. Always snapping, always hiding, Caleth's expression was sharp. "Say the word, and we'll hunt him." Seralyne's eyes burned like molten gold. Not just him. Every last remnant of his rot. From across the realm, the call went out. The Knights of the Ember Sigil rode north, torching outposts built in Varric's name. Pirate Queen Ismira sealed the eastern seas, intercepting vessels smuggling gold to the rebel cause. Veyron Bloodfang, ever hungry for chaos, led brutal strikes through the mountain passes, choking the escape routes. Seralyne herself rode at the front of these wars, not content to rule from a throne, but determined to burn out the disease at its root. Her war was not finished. Her vengeance was not complete. The throne she shattered had been a symbol of oppression. The kingdom she built would be one of vigilance, where peace was kept not through complacency, but through strength. On nights when the stars glittered above, the people whispered tales of their queen, the exiled flame, the breaker of chains, the huntress of shadows, a ruler who had crawled from the ashes of betrayal, risen through blood, and forged a destiny no man could steal. And in the distant, crumbling corners of the world, Varric listened to those whispers, his heart gripped with the cold realization. He had created a queen, and she would not stop until his blood washed the land clean.